All right. How's everybody doing? Yeah, that good, huh?
Good.
Woohoo! Yeah, all right. So, as you might see, these little magazines are now here. They showed up on Monday. These are the film festival print programs. I know for some of you younger folks, this is paper. This is what people read when they wanted to get information. So yeah, this is all of the films that you can find online you can find here, but this doesn't require electricity, just light, and it folds up conveniently in your back pocket in case you want to do that sort of thing. So there are some at the back table and there's some at the front table here. Please avail yourself. I have boxes and boxes of them, and I won't miss it if you take one or even two. All right. Yeah, as a general fun time reminder for all of you, please, 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 pretty please, turn your computers off at the end of the night. All right. Cool. All right, so let me quickly run through here and see if I can find faces and names. And I see you guys. Yeah. Winfield, where are you? No Winfield, not tonight. Nobody's out. Sam, there you are. Logan, no Logan. It's like you thinned out this week. There's a lot of you. There's some people that have emailed me saying they're not feeling well. I was on apparently the leading edge of the illness this time. I promise I wasn't patient zero. Omar, Carlos, there you are. Justin, okay, way in the back. Melissa, I saw you earlier. Echo, Katharina's not here. Travis, no Travis. All right, well, can't win them all. Elliot, there you are. Jacob, with a K, no. Chris McPherson, there you are. Thank you. Coleman, I didn't think I saw. Jake Nunley, no Nunley. Neither Jake. Angel, you're here. Yes. Evan is here. Bodie's here. Lori's here. Thomas here. Jadrian's not here. I know that. Vicky. Oh, there you are. Tanya, no. Yeah, way in the back. Damn it. I'll figure it out. Prachan, you're here. Kai, no. Jared, no. Ryan's here, and Sandy is not. Okay, well. See, it only took me 6 weeks. I'm starting to remember. Oh, Jesus, I'm hopeless this way. All right, let's get into your questions and my responses to the same. And all right, so let me just make sure that I'm being a responsible human being. Cool. Again, yeah, if you guys come up, if you haven't already grabbed your little USB key, wait till the break, come up and grab it. Also, for you guys who, for the first couple of weeks, didn't have one, you do have one now. It's like just making sure I'm starting to pull homework off, and I go, huh, not very many of you guys are putting your homework on these things. So anyway, it's fine. Editorial announcement. All right. Moving into, after creating the Lumetri.look file, I was not able to figure out how to open it in Premiere Pro again. All right. Well, let's do something about that. Premiere Pro. All right. So we'll launch it and we'll have a look at how to put a look in here. So if we create a new project for funds and profit, what you want to understand is that if you have and I'm just going to create an easy, actually, let's do bars and tone because that's always fun. No, not title. Come on, Randy. Bars and tone. There we go. And not this. Jesus. So what we want to and this is your favoriteest basic content, all right, is when you are working in color and you want to basically do a you come up with a look for this thing. So maybe let's let's do something extreme where it's a joke, and we'll. Okay, so we've now fully messed with this thing, and we've created this, and now we want to save and export a look. So for this one, we'll call Randy's awesome look. Save it, and now what you can do is we can reset this this effect. All right, let's get rid of this effect and replace it with a new one. So maybe this time we'll go back to the master. When you're working with a look, you can actually come in through the creative. So the question was, you can't find a way to reapply a look once you've saved it. If you try coming in through the LUT here, what you'll notice is that this only allows you to, actually, well, no, it won't allow you to load the look file, okay? So this is the basic correction. This input LUT is for doing kind of pre-color, level setting. If you know that your footage is a certain type on a certain stock, or a certain camera sensor, you can actually create a lookup table that will kind of make it easier for you to have a starting point to work from for color correction and color changes and looks that you want to create. So that's the basic correction area, this input LUT. So that's a file that you can apply there. But it's limited only to that LUT or 3D LUT file extension. The area where if you wanted to apply a look that you created, you come to the creative group right here, and you click on the look file, and then you browse for it, and you'll notice that now you can grab Randy's awesome look and apply it, and now that by itself is now applied to your footage as a single step. You can still go in here and do more fooling around if you want, but that's not the, it's like that's what the color control does. So when you're dealing with that dot look and you want to be able to apply it back, you can use the Lumetri color control and go into the creative group to apply it and not do anything else, and then your look is applied. By the way, in terms of how their presets work, that is basically the same. It's the same mechanism. So that's why when you look over here and you see all of these are all of the built-in looks that that Adobe has for the Lumetri color thing. It's like these are all just look files. So all right, yeah. So that's color looks and the Lumetri color control. Your mileage may vary. Don't freak out. It's all good. Okay. Glad we had that conversation. So yeah, so loading it. A look or a cube file back into the effect requires the use of the creative group in Lumetri. When you export something from After Effects using the Add to Render Queue option, why does it create a log folder? That's actually, it's not a bad question. After Effects has actually a lot of different ways to render, including installing multiple copies of what's called the AE render engine. So if you actually install After Effects, you actually install this as well. So there's this render engine is available as a separate application when you install After Effects on from Creative Cloud. This actually doesn't need a Creative Cloud activation to run. So you could, if you were very enterprising and you had an instructor who was complicit in this, you could install the After Effects render engine on all of these computers, which it already installed, and use them to render your sequence as a farm, as a render farm. So that's what the point of that is. That, let me back this up. So the log folder is just part of that setup. So the fact that you have a log every time you render something is just telling you how the render was executed. If there were any problems with it, the problems would be outlined inside that log file. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting, we don't really talk much about using After Effects in a very real world situation where in a VFX environment where they have, teams of visual effects artists working in After Effects or other stuff. We'll get to that. There's another question about that. They will send their output to these render farms, which will then crunch all of them. And they're just like servers in a data center sort of look. And you can even do this with things like Amazon Web Services, which, by the way, was having some fun today. In order to basically scale your rendering. So if you need to render something fast, you can and you have lots of money, you can get something rendered really fast. But because basically what you're doing is you're creating this little army of render bots, and you're controlling them with your After Effects, application to tell them what to do. When I was messing around with AE, I had some issue with loading the clip for the second assignment where I had to blur the filter and turn it blue. Is this because of my computer, or was it just taking a bit to conform the clip? I almost bounced this question, but I decided I'd go ahead and answer it because I thought it was okay. Generally, though, what you'll find in the homework is the examples are really mainstream in terms of the footage encoding, so they should load without issue. If that was happening for me, what I would do is I'd just run through my troubleshooting kind of protocol, which would be close and reopen the project, try it again. If that doesn't, and then from there, bounce your computer, then reinstall. If the worst case scenario is reinstalling the application from scratch. But I've had to do it with both Premiere and After Effects enough that it is now part of my troubleshooting workflow for the work that I do on this stuff. So that's why I say, having a troubleshooting plan is not a bad idea. Understanding that, you start with something simple, then you escalate until you're like going down to the store and buying a new computer. Hopefully that's far enough down the road that you fix it before you get to that point. If you're trying to manage your time, but your project's going to use video effects, should you first see what you can make in Premiere or go straight to After Effects? You'll find this runs into a series of questions that are running this way. The correct answer to this is it depends. But there are some things that can indicate that you should consider moving directly to After Effects and not spend a lot of time trying to make it work in Premiere. Remember, the effects in Premiere are they're actually very capable, but they're very basic. So if your needs move beyond the basic, that's really the indicator that you're looking at. So complicated compositing and or motion, meaning keyframes, anything 3D. And if you're really interested in doing high quality key, like chroma key or rotoscoping of something, you can rotoscope in Premiere. I would not recommend you do that, but you can. It is possible. Just why would you? But all right, totally separate question. In After Effects, it seems I cannot export the video like in Premiere Pro. When I render the file, does AE export the video? Is this the difference between After Effects and Premiere Pro? Well, After Effects it is a difference, meaning that you can't just go, in Premiere you would go Command or Control M, and especially if you had a sequence, Command or Control M. And it would go to the export settings where you can export your film, right? And in case you wanted to export your bars and tone, you'd be all set. Notice again, though, I think I reminded you when I first showed you guys this, the thing to realize is that After Effects by default, if you hit enter from this, even though your preset is NTSC and you'd make me crazy, the default behavior for this is to queue this request into Media Encoder. That's your first clue. Okay? So when you queue your request into Media Encoder, it's going to basically launch Adobe Media Encoder, and then it's going to want to do its magic. So once Media Encoder gets loaded up, we'll see. And I'm going through this process because I had somebody walk up at the beginning of class and ask me, well, I exported from AE into Media Encoder, but how do I actually get it to render? And I'm like, okay. And it was an easy question, so I was like, but I'm going to go ahead and run through it here so that we can all relive the embarrassment. Okay, so here's Media Encoder. You've got the job is showing here in the queue, right? So, and I'm not going to hit go on this, but well, maybe I'll hit go and then I'll hit stop. But the idea is that you have the export job, and don't forget when you're in Media Encoder, if you want to actually create this output file, you have to hit the play button. So you have to start the queue, and so once you do that, the magic happens. The rendering starts and it outputs. And in fact, this went way too. Oh, because it was bars and tone, it went out really fast. Oh well, too late. I couldn't cancel it. Yeah, so now we have bars and tone and DV and TSC. Oof, yeah. All right, so that was out of Premiere. In After Effects, when you start a project and you have some output that you want to create, so we'll create a new comp. So new comp, make it full. We'll make it red because red is good. Again, it's scale the window. All right, so we have this red comp, and we want it to be, it's 10 seconds. So yeah, we're going to export 10 seconds of red. Sure, why not? So when you want to export, you can notice again that it's the first choice on the list of export is add to Adobe Media Encoder queue. They want you to use Media Encoder for exporting your media. Okay, that's the cue. That's the clue for this is that they want you to send your projects to Adobe Media Encoder. So once you do, and it goes relatively fast, hopefully pretty fast, maybe a little bit fast. There it is. Okay, so comp 1 is now in there. You'll see that it is. Oh God, this damn preset is killing me over and over again. Whatever. So we want to do the same thing. You'll come over here, you'll hit start, and it'll run, and then you'll hopefully this time stop it before it continues. And then it's going to run. It's going to connect to. It's going to connect to After Effects, and then start to basically run the render directly. So that is, I mean, getting to know Media Encoder is a good idea. If you haven't already, absolutely you want to be doing this. All right. Now let's get back to where we were talking about. So in summation, After Effects really encourages you to use this Media Encoder. That is, if you're not doing some kind of complicated compositing workflow in a cinema context, meaning if you're working for a VFX shop, you're not going to be exporting out of After Effects to the Media Encoder. You're going to be doing it to something like OpenEXR or DPX or something along those lines. So, but don't worry about that right now. Just for you guys where you're at, with the projects that you're very likely to be doing for the foreseeable future, you probably don't want to be using the Adobe render queue to export your stuff. Generally, you can do it all the Media Encoder and it'll look fine. Is there a way to create an animation in Flash or CC Animate now, I guess, and conveniently import it into After Effects? Okay, so Flash, really? Okay, so realistically, the only way to get an animation out of Animate CC into Premiere or After Effects is to render it as an FLV or Flash video. So there's no way to like take a project that you've been working on inside of Animate and then bring those layers into After Effects. They don't have that. That linkage is not available to you. So just be aware of that. In that case, it's not a great. There's no dynamic link for that one. Sorry. And speaking of dynamic link, if I create a dynamic link from Premiere to a clip and edit it in After Effects, does the resulting file or clip exist as a separate After Effects file in addition to the clip in Premiere, or does it live only in the original document? So The basic question here is when you're dealing with After Effects and you do the dynamic link, the terrible dynamic link idea that I keep trying to dissuade you from, and you keep bringing it up. I'm like thinking, serial abusers, what is this? So it does create a separate project file automatically as part of that whole dynamic link process. It tries to store, generally speaking, it tries to store that file with your Premiere Pro project. Whether that's a good or bad thing is a subject of debate. So the thing to get out of that, though, is that it is actually creating a separate project file. It's not, even though it looks like it's embedded into Premiere. Part of that is the fact that Premiere, the way Premiere works, is that you can take a comp. So say we save this composition here, this brilliant red composition. So it's like Randy in a blood shower. All right, so we'll save that to the desktop because there's no better place than to save all of your stuff to the desktop. And if we then go into Premiere and import this wretched thing, let me, oh my God. All right, so let me import this in here, rain shower. You can import that into this, and it's actually, when it sees that you're importing an After Effects composition, it's gonna say, which comp do you wanna import? And so we'll say, since there's only one choice, we'll say comp 1, import it, and now that footage shows up as a composition in Premiere that you can drop in, and it won't show you anything right now because it isn't rendered. So, but if you render it, it will show you a red still. Basically, that it'll show you this composition right here. Oh no, it won't, because guess what? My composition has nothing in it. Oh, man, now I feel dumb. Here, we'll put a solid in. Put a red solid. That's always what makes it better, is putting in red solid. Okay, so now my composition. And actually, the funny part is that if you save this and switch back over, this is the same thing the dynamic link does, okay? So you can do this without using the dynamic link. You just import the AE project into Premiere and then select the comp that you want to use as footage, and it'll make a clip for it in Premiere, and then you can just drop it in. So that is how you don't have to use dynamic link. Does that make it better? Maybe? All right. Okay. So I love using these very detailed, very complicated demos as part of this class. Working with layers in After Effects, fundamentally the same as working with layers in Photoshop. Yeah, they are basically. I think that's sometimes I generally try to make the claim that After Effects is like Photoshop for video, because that's basically how it behaves in a lot of ways. It's a cross between Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop for video, but that's, most of what it does has more similarity to Photoshop, so hence that's why we tend to think of it that way. So if you wanted to talk about chief differences, is the keyframing and motion controls, which are much more capable in After Effects. Though newer versions of Photoshop start to get, just like in the same way that Premiere is getting some pieces of other applications embedded into it, so that you can do, the basics, basic effects and basic audio work and stuff like that without having to go outside of that program. Photoshop's very similarly aligned. Is like, you don't necessarily, for basic motion stuff, you can do it in Photoshop. You can. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. What ways can we mask colors over each other without looking oversaturated? That's an interesting question. I'm guessing this is a compositing question, but I don't remember who asked it, so I'm gonna roll with what I got. My general answer to this, though, is that if you're concerned about overlaying colors and having it look oversaturated, there are controls and effects available to you that you have already learned. But there are more. We'll do a whole color. We'll do a week about color in After Effects, which is different than in Premiere. But there are color effects to help kind of prevent or enhance saturation for whatever look you're trying to achieve. Do you recommend that we learn Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop along with After Effects? If you have the time. But if I had to choose one, I would say you should absolutely learn Photoshop. I know that you guys have all taken the class with, or hopefully, taken the class with Mike on Photoshop, and you've had time with that, because honestly, there's pretty strong similarities between the two, and in terms of functionalities, and there are some things you can do much faster in Photoshop. Especially if it has to do with a still image. You can, and the thing is that most of what you can do in Photoshop, you can do with a still image in After Effects. You could. It's not well suited to the task, but you can do it. So you kind of have to choose the right tool for the job. This is one of these in the world of, if the only thing you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. So if the only tool you have is After Effects and you don't have any other, you start to think of how you can use After Effects for video editing and photo editing and all these other editings. And can you? To an extent you can, but that does not mean you should. So. What does playing in real time mean? So I'm guessing this is real-time playback of video. Real-time playback is where the computer tries to display motion at the same speed that you would normally view it if it was, if it was happening, if it was playing on something more capable. The idea is that if the computer can't keep up with that content while it's playing, it will start to just drop content out and then replace, and then kind of skip forward to the next frame of content that you're expecting to be there. So that's where you start to see the frame rate drop, is because it's basically your encoder's going, I can't finish that frame. Nope, that one. Nope, not that one, or that one, or that one. I can do this one. And so it will, so what you'll see is your frame rate drops, your actual frame rate that as you're looking. So you'll see a still frame of video, and then it's going to jump to another still frame of video. Everything in between those were dropped frames, and that's what this is. But in terms of for the audio you're hearing at that time, that was a frame of video that should have been on screen for that moment, and then all of a sudden now it's, the computer's falling behind again. So just keep that in mind. Real-time playback that's what this. When you're playing a composition in After Effects, when you're doing a comp here and you're doing the preview, you're pressing this. Now, with an easy composition like this that's not doing anything, it can play your comp in real time. But if there's any computation it needs to do that slows it down, After Effects will actually play it slower. It will play you every frame of your comp. That's not real time. That's the opposite of real time. This is basically just making sure that it wants to make sure that you see every frame of your composition as it renders, over the idea of playing it in real time and just dropping the content that it's not able to keep up with. All right. How often would you go in and out of After Effects in your workflow, or would it be better to save all your work in After Effects until the end? It depends. There are situations where you might want to do an initial comp or compositions in a rough state. We usually sometimes call this pre-visualizations, in order to have a rough visual indicator of what you're trying to do. So that is a situation where you would spend some time in After Effects before while you're still cutting picture, perhaps, because you're trying to for areas where you're going to have explosions. Maybe you have a live clip in After Effects where somebody's scrambling from side to side, and then you'll put just like boom and blast or other things on screen so that you can visually kind of get where what's happening, what needs to happen to realize your vision. So, I mean, that's the whole realm of pre-visualizations. Is After Effects the industry standard? Any other software that compares? All right, so After Effects, the question is actually kind of an interesting one, and I debate the premise of it, because what industry are you talking about? All right, so that would be my counter. If you're talking about independent filmmakers, yes, After Effects is absolutely the industry standard for visual effects, because there's not many other affordable options in the ecosphere. If you're talking about like high-end cinematic, man, no. There's a lot of options out there. There is an open source option for VFX. It's called Blender. How many of you guys have heard of Blender? A couple of you, good. I don't use Blender, but I've heard very good things about it. It's actually more complicated than After Effects in a lot of ways. It's got aspects of Cinema 4D in it as well, and other things. So you can do lots with Blender that you couldn't do with After Effects, and there's still some things in After Effects that you couldn't do in Blender, but that's becoming less of a thing. But for high-end stuff, there's Nuke, there's Smoke, Autodesk Smoke. Blackmagic Fusion's another one of these that I've heard of, but I haven't really played with. So there are lots of competition out there, and understand that some VFX houses will make their own tools, so totally separate from these, that to do certain tasks for them. So if they have enough money and time and brain power, they can come up with their own tool chain and make it work. Yeah.
So having the basic After Effects like knowledge, will you be able to use some of that stuff, or at least have a good idea about how to use it?
Yes. So the question being, if you toil in After Effects and you spend all this time taking a class on After Effects, can you leverage that knowledge? And the answer is yes, because the terminology may be slightly different. The concepts are not. You'll notice that I think it's Nuke. I've demoed this before, but I don't demo it now because I'm tired today. But Nuke is actually what they call a nodal compositor. Instead of the way that After Effects does it is like layers. It does, and After Effects, the concept is layers. The layers on top obscure the layers underneath, pending how the blending mode is set up. That is how compositing works in After Effects. In Nuke, and I think possibly Smoke has also got some nodal compositing features, is that you can actually treat them like, I want this, you can actually kind of split them out as separate kind of little floaty objects and then combine them. And how you combine them is basically that blending operation like layers in After Effects, but it's not necessarily as simple, and it can be a much more, convoluted. I mean, it's both. You have considerably more power and options, and obviously you have considerably more opportunity to fall and trip on your shoelaces. So, yeah. The point of this, though, is that After Effects really does have the edge in the marketplace, because there's really a deep well of knowledge, tribal knowledge, tutorials, and talent out there that is trying to figure out new ways to use the software. So, should you use After Effects in conjunction with Premiere Pro? Should you do all that you desire in Premiere before jumping into After Effects? See, these questions kind of write themselves, guys. Again, it depends, and this time I trademarked it because it was getting. It's just like, okay, there's no correct answer here, guys. The project will tell you how soon or late you want to turn to After Effects for your work. And I know that might frustrate some of you to hear that, but that's just how it is. I mean, I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm saying it because it's the case. You'll find that when you're working in Premiere, you'll come up, and I think I mentioned this before, you're going to come to a point where you're working on something and you'd be like, man, this is really hard. It's like Premiere's not suited to this. And if it is compositing related or visual effects related, or if it's something along those lines, you might think, oh, maybe I should be moving this particular piece of content into After Effects to work on it. And that's where the magic happens. So, I think a lot of it is you will learn this boundary, that when that time comes, it's like any muscle, you learn how, and you develop that ability, and then you'll recognize it sooner next time. So don't freak out. What was the first digital special effects program to be widely used before After Effects? I'm going to make myself look old today. All right. So the first one I can remember being easy to get access to, which is definitely dating myself, is the video toaster on a Commodore Amiga. Anybody know what a Commodore Amiga is? Oh, there's 3 of you. All right, cool, man. They're true believers back there. Because, I mean, if you were into video back in, 90s, and you didn't have a broadcast studio to work for, toaster on the Amiga was like the bomb, man. This thing was, how many of you guys have ever heard of Babylon 5? Yeah, you guys know that all of the computer graphics in Babylon 5 were done on the Amiga. Yeah, for the first 3 seasons anyway. I think they moved off of that as their budget increased. So, but yeah, it's like, so a television series, and a relatively popular one, the visual effects were done on a Commodore, and that's pretty impressive. But yeah, so that was way before After Effects was a thing. Well, actually, it wasn't that far before After Effects was a thing, but After Effects was kind of a toy when this was doing real work. That's the point. Okay. Phew. So, where are we at? What are we doing? Let's see. We've got people on the chat. Ooh. All right, so we've got there are some of you guys who aren't here who are watching on the live stream. So I don't necessarily put that out there so that you guys can be like, hey, you mean I can be at home in my pajamas? Because if I come in and the room's empty, I go home. So yeah, don't take that as like, hey, but like I said, there's been people who have not been feeling well, so I said here's the link to the live stream so that you can at least participate. And by the way, all of these are still available after the fact, so you guys can relive the magic. Like I said, there's no end to it. All right. Let's talk a little bit about compositing in After Effects. It's a brief little lecture, and then we'll do some demo stuff together, and we'll call it a night. So what are we going to talk about this week? Importing and compositing using Photoshop assets. This is, again, using Photoshop as a basis for content. Shape layers and groups and the pen tool. We'll talk about pre-composing when you might need it. And we'll talk more again about blend modes, masks, and track mattes. And that's where things can get kind of crazy. So there's a lot of stuff in here. So we'll get to this. So compositing basics. The idea again is that a comp is comparable to a video track in Premiere and layers in Photoshop because it has time elements. It has a playhead, right? And it also has this ability to stack things one on top of the other and have things on the top layers obscure or blend into the layers that are underneath it. So that's, and this is the whole point of compositing in and of itself in terms of how After Effects behaves. So that similarity between Photoshop PSD files leads to this ability to import these files as content, as composites, as like you can treat them like compositions with their own individual layers as well. And we'll do that as a demo shortly. Well, what an interesting screen grab. I was like, oh, look, that's from the film festival last year. Oh, cool. All right. And so what you end up with is you end up with a composition that looks like this is an imported Photoshop file where you'll get a composition that's the same name as the Photoshop file, and then you'll have these layers, and each of those layers is relates to a layer inside of the PSD. And so this is pretty useful capability for treating. It shows the relationship in a nice way. So if you're used to using groups in Photoshop, you can actually kind of start to grok pre-comps pretty quickly inside of After Effects. And then shape layers. I'm like, yeah, and here you go. Here's all the things to know about shape layers. No. The idea behind shape. Oh, so let's actually switch gears here, and yeah, let's switch gears and go to After Effects. So if you guys want, go ahead and boot up if you haven't already launched, taken the clue and launched After Effects. Go ahead and do that, and let me find you guys a suitable Photoshop file to butcher. What? Okay, that's better. Do my bidding, damn you. All right, so let's see. Classes, CS. Oh, geez, come on. Here we go. Okay. Really? Graphic sources. Do I want to use this? No. There's no PSDs in here. That's why I was like, I'm looking for a suitable candidate for content. I, of course, I botched this and didn't. Well, let's see if we can find something. PSD. Bag menu. All right. So yeah, there's always we'll get to this. So, all right. So for easy, do I really want to go down this road with you guys right now? Yeah, we'll have to. So for ease of use, go to, let's see. Sorry, let me catch my. All right, so under class 10, if you guys open up the file on the server, Gemini server, or the Magini file server, go to class 10 under this class, and you'll find a folder called, yeah, let's do Jeremy Renner. We'll take Jeremy Renner and drag him to your desktop. What the hell? Could be worse. All right, and again, this is just to kind of give you a sense of what we're trying to do. We're going to use this at a later time for a different demo, but for the purposes of trying to figure this out, what I'm interested in is this PSD right here. This one, Jeremy Renner .psd, and so if you have that on your desktop, I'm sorry I'm going fast, but so the idea is to have the desktop, you'll drag the folder from the class 10 over, and then we're gonna open this inside of After Effects. So I'll give you guys a moment to catch up. When you guys are all looking at me like, what you waiting for? I'll figure that you're all waiting. so let's, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe this project, start clean, nothing in it. I'm going to turn up the lights so that you guys can all see. Don't fall asleep on me. All right. So when you can double click inside the project pane or come up to File, Import, and do File. On your desktop, you should have a jeremyrenner.psd. When you go to open it, you'll see that it doesn't immediately add it to your project. It actually stops you and says, what are you importing here? You have a couple of options. You have the ability to import Jeremy Renner as footage, which would basically be a flat image, flat content. Okay? You also have the ability to do a composition, which will treat it like an After Effects comp. And then you have this next one that says you can actually import it with composition and retain layer sizes. What that means is if in Photoshop those different elements, those different layers are not all the same size, and generally if you're masking or if you're cutting bits and pieces off of one thing or another, and you put it into a different layer, you're not. The layer might occupy the same space as the size of your image, but the content in that layer is actually just those pixels that are in that layer. And so if you talk about the layer size, it's just a bounding box around those pixels that are in that layer. So for purposes of this, let's do composition without the layer size. So we'll choose it as just composition. The layer options, you can actually leave your editable styles, or you can merge them into the footage. Generally speaking, if you have layer styles in Photoshop, it will apply them. It will render them into the pixels that basically get imported into After Effects. There usually isn't a great reason to do that, and you might find that there is. They obviously offer it as an option, so you're welcome to use it. Once you click OK, what's going to happen is it's going to add two things. First thing it adds is a composition. So it's got a composition there. And then it actually created a folder with a bunch of stuff in it. And so each of these is a layer from the Photoshop file. And you can see that it's called out as Photoshop as the content type. So this, any question there? No. Okay. So, oh yeah, just kick Evan. Anytime you need to, just kick him. That's not officially what I would say. Just Evan, I respect you deeply. Yeah. All right. So, but the idea is that, is similar in a similar sense that you can import an After Effects project into Premiere, and it will say, oh, what comp do you want to pull in? That's a similar sort of function that this is providing. Is like when you import a Photoshop file, it goes, how do you want to import it? Do you want to import it just as a flat image, which sometimes you'll do, or do you want to import it with all of its layers available to you? So let's see what this does. It actually creates a series of different layers here. So, and if you turn some of them on and some of them off, you'll see that you have a background layer. You have a copy of the background layer, which has been butchered. You have a second layer, which is the Captain America poster has been kind of replaced. Even though it's not exactly the same, it's similar enough, isn't it? And then you have Jeremy Renner on top. So now when we did this, though, you'll see that each of these comps or each of these layers, when I double click a layer, it actually brings up the layer viewer. Each of these layers is the same exact size as the composition itself. Okay? So and so when you do it with this one as well, that will be it's actually showing you the entire, that layer is the same size as the comp. Now, if I wanted to do it differently, I could, Now, I'll just do the undo the import, and I'll redo this import where we'll basically import the PSD file. Oops, there we go. And this time I'm going to choose retain layer sizes. So now when I open this, you're going to see it looks the same, right? I mean, you open the comp and hey, wow, everything's there. But now look at when I mouse over each individual layer, you'll see that the bounding box is just around the content of that layer, okay? So now if you double click on Jeremy Renner, he's in a nice little tight, a nice little tight mat. You notice I didn't take the time to actually knock out the space between his arm and his suit. Oh, well. Ditto with Captain America is that this has been kind of tilted and twisted and tried to make fit on the wall behind it. But then the background copy and the background itself is all in place. So now, so when you're looking at these, you'll see that each of these is now a much tighter. So there's reasons to import it either way. Again, they offer you this option for a reason. This version of the import was retaining the layer sizes. So the layer sizes from the Photoshop file, not from the After Effects composition. Because when you do it as just a composition where the layer sizes are not maintained, they'll all be the same size. All of your layers will be the same size as the composition itself.
So would you use that one if you were going to be doing motion?
Well, if you knew that you were going to move Jeremy across the screen, you could definitely. Oops, sorry, I got the wrong view. So if you knew that you were going to move him across the screen, it might be easier to just kind of drag him. So you're like, hey, how you doing? And so you that would be easier than having his whole thing be take up the same size as that. It would just be a little more awkward. If you're going to do any kind of transforms, that would really be a thing. So if for some reason, say you wanted to rotate Jeremy Renner, you might want to have it rotate. Well, maybe not around his groin, but so let's have it rotate around his fist. So you can have it rotate, there. Whereas if it was the previous one, the anchor point would have been in the center of the layer, because the layer was the entire composition size, and it would have been a little more strange. I don't know. That's the short answer is you can make it work either way. But if you knew that you were going to be animating these layers independently, I would generally suggest using the retain layer sizes. Okay, that was fun. We're coming up on a break, so I think we might just call this that point. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a break. It's almost 8 o'clock. What we'll do is give me 10 minutes. I'm gonna kind of reshuffle things around. If you haven't, you can come up and grab your little USB key fob thingy to upload your homework to, and or bring it back up when you're done, and there you go. All right. Okay. Now we're going to talk, what? The chairs? That chair is broken. Why don't you swap? There's one right next to you that's open. All right, well, then it's self-inflicted at this point. Okay. All right, so let's get back to this. A couple more things I want to cover tonight, and this is one of them. Shape layers. So, you know, we've now talked about the similarities between Photoshop and After Effects. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the Adobe Illustrator similarities, if you want. They're not as similar. Shape layers. So that's basically the ability, and just use the same comp we've been using because we're gonna kind of revisit things on this a couple of times. Let's start by actually creating a new composition. So if you're in After Effects, go ahead, go up to composition menu, new comp, or you can click on the little film strip. And either case, it's going to bring up this new composition. So we'll call this one Shape Demo. And just as long as it's 1080p, 1920 by 1080, I don't care the frame rate. 10 seconds is probably a better choice. And for mercy, we'll make the background black. Okay, so here you go. You've got a glorious black composition. Not much to it. When you start to talk about adding things to a composition, we've shown one way to do it. You can import content like a media, like it can be a media clip, it can be video, it can be a still. So we did a Photoshop file to demonstrate that. So you can import content into this as content to be put into a comp, or you can create new layers, and there are several to choose from. The ones we're going to talk about right now is the shape layer. So, and that's this one right here underneath all of these. We will talk about all of these other ones. Well, we might not talk about text that much. I mean, how many of you guys really need me to tell you that there's a text layer inside of After Effects that you can, really? Okay. I was like, man, you got to be messing with me, because you know it's just like the text layers you would see in Photoshop, or it's like but it can be animated. So we don't really go into deep detail on the text layers. They behave a lot like shape layers, so pay attention and you'll learn a lot. So if you want to create a new piece of content that isn't imported, you have to create it yourself, and so that's using the layers capability. So let's start by creating a shape layer, and you think, well, nothing's changed, except that now your composition has something in it, and that's good. So what goes into a shape layer? You actually have some choices now that can make a difference for you in terms of what happens next. You do have some tools up here, right? You can use any of these actually in a shape layer. I think you can even use a text tool in there too. But so for instance, you do have a shape tool which currently is set to rectangle, but if you click and hold, it gives you some other options here. These should look relatively familiar. You do have a rectangle, rounded, ellipse, a polygon tool, and then a star tool. And each of these, you actually have the ability to kind of tweak a little bit. So for the rounded rectangle, you'll notice that you do have the ability to change the, where are we going? Where am I at? Come on, Randy. There we go. So you can actually come in and change the output of the. Oh wait, darn it! Oh, come back and do it again. All right. No, I don't want to do a busy path. So. No, all right. And for the life of me, I can't remember right now the tools for rounding the corners. you also have the ability to add polygons. You can drop polygons in. You can actually deal with the number of points of a polygon that this has, anywhere from 3 up to a lot. You do have the ability to, hold on, let me. So you do have some control over this. Understand that these are all keyframeable again. When you talk about the rectangle, oh, here it is. Yeah, so you do have the ability to affect the roundness of the shape as well. So there's two things to understand when you're dealing with a well, you also have a pen tool where you can come in and create your favorite shape from whatever your imagination has. So now we've created 3 shapes. We've got a rectangle, what they call a polystar, which is the polygon. So we have a rectangle, we have a polygon, a polystar, and we have a shape. Now, understand that what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with a single shape layer. So there's the default behavior when you start to add shapes to a shape layer is that when they overlap, they kind of just overlap. And if there's no border on these, now each of these has a 2 pixel stroke. So the two things to kind of for each shape is there's a fill, which is red in this case, and then there's a stroke, which is that white, the white line around it. So you can actually change this so that it is 0 pixels. So now the stroke is gone, and now it's just kind of an amorphous blob of creativity, right? Sure. So you now that's not the only way to combine these things. You do have the ability under shape layers to add different kind of functions here. So you can actually have some varieties of how these shapes behave with one another. You have blending modes for each of these shapes as well. So you do have the ability to, and when they're all the same color, it's not really going to do much here. So no, all right, I'm not going to bother with it. Oh, that's the reason why is no, all right. I'm going to give up on that one. So, but understanding that you do have the each of these shapes have properties to them. So in the case of shape 1, you have what's called a path, okay, which is the actual outline. You have the stroke, which is that right now it's 0 pixels, but you can vary the size of the stroke. You can set that and you can keyframe it here, and each of these has its own additional features to it. So you can tweak all of these as to your heart's content. The fill, again, is something that you can do. You can actually choose how the fill behaves in terms of how it interacts with the other colors, or you can change the color of the fill as well. So it can be eye-searingly green and red, which are 2 great colors to put right next to each other because it makes your eye actually hurt. And you have the ability for each of these individual shapes in the shape layer. You have the ability to transform just that shape. Generally speaking, this is the hard way of doing shape animation. So yeah, question. Oh, stretching. All right. Hey, fair enough. So the idea is that you can animate all of these features and animate a shape from within a shape layer, but that's actually more complicated than you might want to do. Generally speaking, the way I treat it is shape layers. If you want to make it easy on yourself, you put one shape on a shape layer. or you group them together as long as you want to treat them and they want to animate them all together as a unit. So keep that in mind. There's the ability to control all of these properties for each of these notions. The other thing is that for the layer itself has its own transform group as well. So in addition to the transform for each individual shape, you have a transform group that's overall, which is the one that you're expecting, which is, you have rotation and you have scale and opacity and whatnot. And that treats all of those things equally, right? So then there is the ability to add additional features to this. So you can, if you wanted to, you could create an overall stroke for the entire shape group. I believe that you put it up here. No? Oh no, it wants to be. Yeah, okay. Its stroke is at the bottom. And if you add that stroke to everything, it basically adds it to the sum of all of those things together. So you can treat the shape actually as a single thing that you can then enhance and deal with. So things like putting an edge around a complicated path that you create from multiple different shapes that you can position to each other is one way to play in shape layers. You can also do the same with fills, where you can give a fill that will you can apply to all of the shapes above. Notice that it doesn't affect the part that is that intersects between two. So there's plenty of these. There's all kinds of settings here. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but the idea is that you have at your disposal a way to create, kind of two-dimensional shapes on screen, and each of those are animatable in its own, as a unit and as a group. Okay. Now, well, let me see if there's anything. There's a bunch of these, a bunch more of these different functions that you can add to this. One of them is kind of interesting, and you'll see in some 2D. Let's ditch one of these. I'm actually just going to stick with. Actually, I'm going to just start over. I'm going to put a star in here. You don't have to do this. You can create a new shape layer, or a new comp, or something along those lines if you're interested. Okay, so I wanted to create a star. I want to give it a color because I like pink. Sure, why not? And I also want to size it a certain way. So I want to basically transform and scale this thing down a little bit. So I'm going to basically come down like this. Now you can actually add something called a repeater to this. Okay, and what is that going to do is that actually is going to have it inside of the group. And if you'll notice, it's like you can actually set a number of copies of the original shape, and you can actually offset them as well. You have the ability to rotate those individual pieces. You can position them a little bit so that they behave you can actually have them behave. It's interesting because the transform group actually has to do with the copies that you're dealing with, and it kind of multiplies as you go, so that if you want things to shrink or grow, and when you now deal with this polystar, and you're rotating this polystar, you're actually just dealing with the whole group. Whereas if you rotate this one, you see that you're dealing with the individual copies as part of that. Let me see if I can get this to do something more interesting. Maybe not. Maybe this is. Oh, you do. Yeah, they provide you. Sorry. So there's these additional things that you can tack on to. Bless you. You can tack on to shape layers to add different capabilities. And these are, again, how you assemble them and how you choose to plug them together makes kind of all the difference into the output that you get. So, you know, this is fertile ground for experimentation, obviously. All right. Now, you might wonder, maybe you don't, but maybe you do. When you're creating a shape, you have, when you're choosing a shape, you actually have, when you're working with a shape layer, you have a couple of options. We're going to start talking about masks here pretty quick. And unfortunately, the way you create masks and the way you create shapes are very similar, meaning that you use shape tools and use the pen tool to create masks and create shapes. So how do you contend with that on a shape layer where by default, when you're using a pen, you're actually creating a shape. But if you wanted to create a mask and you wanted to mask off part of this, you could actually come in here with the star tool and you have this group up here. These only light up when you're on a shape layer. So the tool creates a shape or the tool creates a mask. Right now, by default, when you're working with this, you're creating a shape. But if you wanted to create a mask, you could actually use this. I'll do it right over top of this so that it's a little more, okay? I'll do it right over the top of this so that's a little more. There we go. So you can also create a mask, which is now separate from the shape, the contents on the shape layer. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about masks and what that means. So let's dress this up a little bit. So we have the shape layer. What I would like you to do is to also create a solid. So go up to Layer, New, Solid. Choose your favorite color. I will probably choose something really bright. And have it, click this button just to be sure, but generally speaking, when if you want to have something that's going to fill the screen, if the solids you're creating will want to fill the screen, you can click this button, and what it will do is, if for some reason this was set to some other value, right? And so you see that this is not the size of, and if I try to create it, you'll see that it's a little smaller. So if I wanted to create a new solid and it's those size, if you click this button, it resets that to the pixel dimensions of your comp. And then when you click OK, you're like, wow, that's a lot of yellow. And when you drop on top of it, you now have this very, well, interesting choice of you have a yellow solid with pink stars on top of it. Oh my God, what have I done? And you have this mask. So now we get a little more, hopefully a little bit more helpful. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale the heck out of this polystar, and that should hopefully help a little bit too. So now, all right, so and actually I'm going to change the mask to be a little less annoying. We'll use a simple rectangle. Okay, so, all right, so now I've created a mask that masks off part of the shape layer, and then the part that's behind the mask is actually just blank, right? So it conceals the part of the layer that's not inside of this rectangle. You can again, as a reminder, in the view pane here, you can click this little button on the bottom that says toggle mask and shape path, so it's right next to the time display. You can click that if you want to get a preview of the window without those shape layers, because sometimes you'll have a bunch of masks. You might have a bunch of masks on screen and you'd be like, I can't see what my comp looks like. You do have the ability to do that without having to get nutty.
Did you create a mask?
That's fine. No, creating a mask. So again, when you're on a shape layer, you want to basically make sure that this control up here is set to create a mask, and then you can grab any of these, you can grab any of the shape tools, whether that's the rectangle to the star or the pen tool, and you can use it to create your mask.
And how did you multiply the stars?
So I use the repeater, which is this feature right here. You get to it from the add menu, and you can come down here to repeater, and it will drop that onto the
Where's the add menu?
the add menu is right next to contents. Okay. So you have all of these available to you. They do all kinds of fun things. Sometimes you'll find one that's actually kind of interesting to play with is trim paths. I don't have a great example of this, but it's worth trying. So let's see what it does. So actually, we'll do that in a sec. Let me finish masks, and then we'll go back to that. So the idea of the mask is that now you have this this box that fills everything in. You might have some other color underneath that, which is fine. You might have multiple shapes on this thing as well. The next so when you're dealing with a mask, we saw this in Premiere. You actually have several properties of the mask that you can contend with as well. You have the shape itself that you can actually manage the shape of over time, because we haven't even talked about animating yet. Okay, we haven't even really talked about keyframing all of this. But understand that with very few exceptions. I mean, like, setting the composite, you can't keyframe that. But I mean, in terms of how things are set up, you absolutely can set these up so that they are keyframed and animated over time. So, and we will get into that. But the idea is that you do have the ability to modify the shape of the mask. So you can go in here, and if for any reason you thought the mask wasn't the right shape, you can actually go in and modify it. You have the ability to feather the mask, which if you remember from Premiere, is how soft that boundary is between the edge of the mask and what's inside and outside of it. So as you notice, as this value increases, I'll shrink this down a little bit so that you can see a little better. So as the value increases for the feathering, you'll see that now you're getting this soft blend between the edge of the mask and what's outside of the mask area. You also have a mask opacity, which generally is will basically obscure or reveal the contents of what's inside the mask. And then you have, again, this mask expansion, which lets you grow and shrink that mask edge. And again, all of these are keyframeable properties. So you have the ability to animate any and all of these to your heart's content. What fun. So that's the basics of masks. And again, this should not be news to you. You guys have played with this in Premiere, and hopefully to a certain degree you've played with this in Photoshop, which has many of these same properties. Okay. So now you know how masks work on a shape layer, but what about a non-shape layer? So when you're dealing with a shape layer or with a non shape layer comp, or if you're just drawing on a layer, and you want to just mask off a certain area, the default behavior, again, see on a non-shape layer, these controls are not available to you because the default behavior is the only behavior, which is to behave like a mask. When you draw a shape tool on a non-shape layer, you're drawing a mask all the time, every time. The only time you ever have that confusion is when you're trying to draw a mask on a shape layer, and that's when you need to actually make that, you have to make that selection yourself. It won't assume for you. So now you have Jeremy's disembodied head, and you have all of the same properties that you had before. You can change the mask shape. You can feather it so that he seems like he's transparent. You can expand or contract. So if you want them to just kind of melt into nothingness, you can do that way. And that's all done with one property on of the mask itself. And just animating that one would provide you with this interesting reveal that would not be necessarily terribly easy to do any other way. So it's like, yeah, you can make him appear or disappear, but have it start with his head and kind of grow outward. That's yeah, there you go. Fun. Learn something new every day, guys. You can choose with masks. You can actually invert it so that the behavior is inverted. So if for some reason the mask, you can have it behave exactly the opposite. So if it's opposite day, you're totally set. You can have the masks actually behave like they're not masks, so they do nothing. That they add to the mask so that it's all right, so that it behaves like you would expect a mask to behave. It subtracts, meaning that it's removing and leaving behind the things that aren't inside of the box. Intersection, which won't matter so much here. If you had a second mask, it would behave like the intersection of those two masks would be what's revealed, and so on. So you have all of these different, and they're not exactly like blend modes. They're a little bit different that way, but you do have the ability. I don't know that either of these are going to make a huge difference in terms of the quality. So yeah, so that's the basics of applying masks inside of non-shape layers. Okay. What else are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about pre-composing. So yeah, let's get to that. Let's say, for instance, that if we're looking at this Jeremy Renner composition, notice that you do have, in this case, it's really pretty basic, but let's say, for instance, just for sake of argument, that you wanted to have Jeremy and the Captain America poster, you wanted to treat them like you were grouping them. You know, in Photoshop, when you group things together, and then you can actually move that group around like it's a combined thing. So the shapes inside of that group they stay the same relative to each other, and that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about pre-composition. So it's a way to keep your projects organized. There are some situations where it's really necessary to do it, but we haven't really hit on those. And so this is really just kind of the introduction to grouping layers inside of After Effects. So we've got these two layers, and say we wanted to pre-compose them. I believe it is, where is it? It is a layer, that's right. So when you want to take something like these two layers and actually group them, you pre-compose them, and that's actually on the layer menu all the way down at the bottom. You'll see this pre-compose option. And so what is it gonna, it's asking you now for, what do you want to call this new composition? You can say Jeremy and the poster, okay? And in this case, there's a couple of options. There's really only one because of the way that we've selected them, but sometimes you can create if you do a pre-comp with one layer in it, which there are reasons why you might, you can actually leave all of the attributes from the layer that you're pre-composing in the original composition. But when you do multiples, you'll generally move all of these attributes, meaning rotation, all the properties pertaining to these layers will get moved to the new comp. And then you can click on Open New Composition, and it's now you have this new composition is Jeremy and the poster, and it's just those two items. And when you go back to the Jeremy Renner, now you have this one pre-comp on top of it that now has its own set of effects. So you can treat it like it's just a group. And if you open up the properties for this thing and you like the transform properties, you can scale it as a group. You can rotate it as a group. You can do all of the fun things that these things do. And you can even use the pan behind tool and change how it scales so that it scales out of Jeremy's eye, let's say, for fun and profit, so that it basically kind of, he zooms in. I don't know. It's kind of, it's interpretive. Sure, why not? So pre-composing is really just the idea of grouping layers together. You will find that there, again, if you're when you start to apply effects to layers, if you want that effect to apply evenly to each layer or to treat them like they were, those effects were need to. Well, let's demo it. So in this case, I'm going to undo the. Oh, there we go. All right, so here we are. Before we pre-compose, we've got these two separate layers. What if I wanted to put an effect on each of these so that it, no, I'm not going to play around current time. Give me this. All right, so I wanted to put an effect on these to blur. Nah, blur. Sure, why not? Blur. Okay. And we'll just do a box blur. And we'll put one on Jeremy, and we're going to set the blur radius to impossible. Now, if you also wanted to blur the poster, you'd have a separate setting for that as well. And now if you wanted to coordinate those for any reason, you'd have to keyframe both of those in lockstep. Now, there are ways that you could do that in After Effects because the rabbit hole has no bottom. However, for simplicity reasons, you might not want to have that be the case. You might actually want to treat them like a single unit. And so when you go in and you pre-compose this layer, pre-compose, Jeremy and the poster, you can now go back to the original comp and add the box blur just to the pre-comp, and now it blurs both of them in lockstep with each other. Now that's a really lame example, but it is an example of why you would do these pre-comp. It is one way to make sure that any effects you're applying are being applied evenly to all of the layers that you want it to affect, and they all end up being treated like a single entity that you can then animate itself, meaning that it has its own transform group. All right. Home stretch. Woohoo! Now, let's dispense with the box blur. That was fun, but we don't need to do that. We have blend modes. So when you're dealing with, and blend modes are another reason to pre-compose things. So you might find that, so in this case, we've got the layer view has these buttons, and I want to see the blend modes. So in order to do that, I actually will switch I'll click this toggle switches and modes down here at the bottom, and you'll see now that I have a mode, which is the blend mode, and I have a track mat. Notice that you don't have track mats for pre-comps. That's okay. Then we can now do we can now actually treat the pre-comp as a single entity for blend moding or for blending as well. So we can do a difference where now it's the pre-comp is actually being subtracted from the entire background copy. This might be a little more interesting to do it here with this. So now what you're seeing is the overlay of the pre-comp over the original photograph, And so if you wanted to be pixel perfect in terms of aligning Jeremy's location with what's in the background, you could use something like difference to make sure that that it blacks out. It's exactly the same location. That certainly is one way to do it. So you also have the ability to, oh my God, this could get weird. You can use this to, for all of the blend mode nonsense that's available to you. I'm going to kind of dispense with that here, but understand that you do have the ability to have, well, actually, I think in this case, I might want to go back to the original composition with 4 layers as opposed to, I'm gonna just roll that back. Okay, so in this case, maybe we want Jeremy to be a screen. Oh no, sorry, the poster to be a screen, which is kind of interesting. It's not normal. But you have the ability to have each individual layer affect just the layers underneath it. Notice that obviously the poster, that the fact that the Jeremy Renner layer is on top of the poster means that this is and this is set to normal. It's just gonna obscure anything underneath it. So obviously pending the opacity value, but so for the blend modes to be a little more, you have the ability to mess with these, and I don't know. It's very strange in terms of trying to understand the how different pixels blend into each other. So let me see if I can. I think I'm going to switch to track mats because that's slightly more interesting in this context. This is the first time I've actually tried using this particular demo as the this particular content for this demo. That's why I was kind of like, well, this could work, and I'm looking at it now going, well, there's areas where it works better than others. So you have the ability to set what's called the track mat, where you have some options here. You have obviously the default is no track mat. You have an alpha inverted. You have a luma and a lumen inverted. So what are these? Now alpha is, remember, if you go in here and you look at the poster layer and you look at the alpha of the poster. Oh, sorry. Of this, I'm sorry, that doesn't work because it's showing you the entire alpha of the whole composition, which is not what I wanted to do. Pardon me. So if we wanted to show you the alpha of just that layer, you can see that this was actually from Photoshop. It brings the alpha layer in from Photoshop because I remember painting this and going, oh, look at that. So you get this kind of weird rumply bottom and other stuff like that. That is the alpha mat of this layer. Same with Jeremy Renner, is that when you look at his alpha mat, you'll see that it's just his outline. Okay, so whatever's white is showing, whatever's black is transparent. And when you come back to the composition to look at it, you have the ability to utilize that alpha channel for doing things. So for instance, if you wanted to have, and it's actually using the alpha mat of layer 1 for this, that's kind of weird, but it can happen. You can also do an inverted mat. You can do a luma or a luma inverted mat. Now the track mat only works with the layer immediately above it. So what you'll see is that if you start to work with these layers, you'll see that they are see, here we go. So if I turn that off and you see the alpha inverted, you can see that it's actually using the alpha mat of the poster to knock out alpha to knock out the background of the background image. So for fun, let's go and actually move this background copy up one. You now have the layer. You have Jeremy Renner in the original background poster with this cordon that isn't there anymore. If you do now the track mat, now you're starting to see something kind of interesting. Is you've using Jeremy Renner's outline, his alpha channel, to reveal what's above it. So to reveal to reveal the background layer. So again, if you wanted to, let's go back. Let's actually move the original background in, and we'll turn everything back on. Set this to alpha mat, and now, oops. I love when I do things. Yeah, so what you're seeing now is the ability for, oh my God, this is crazy. When you, so it's the inverted mat of Jeremy's outline is knocking out him in the background, but it reveals anything underneath it. So if you wanted to, we could actually create a solid underneath that. Call it, well, sure, let's make it yellow, and drag it to the bottom. And now that is revealed through that inverted alpha mat. The opposite is the case here as well. Obviously, if the mat was overlaid on him correctly, it would look appropriate. But you know, all right, that's fine. But the idea is not to. I mean, it's not as simple as, you know, you could just do this over yellow background, but that's not what you want to use. Just the alpha channel of this to reveal some other content. So when you talk about kind of how many of you guys remember? Oh boy, that was a mistake. Let me do this. I'm gonna quickly. We're almost out of content. So we've got some time. So YouTube for the iTunes commercials, iTunes ads. So this sort of behavior right here, where you're looking at this, that's the sort of technique we're talking about. This is an alpha inverted mat right here. Okay, that's what you're looking at. So that is the technique that I'm showing you. Is you're using an alpha channel of something to reveal or obscure something else. So the fact that we're using an alpha channel, now the whole thing with the iPod was placed in later, but the basic idea here is that you have a background and you have this alpha channel and you're just knocking it out. So it's a silhouette. That's a relatively easy thing to do if you have an alpha channel for that dancer. And if they're dancing against the green screen, guess what? It's super easy to get that alpha channel. So, okay. So that's kind of where I'm going with this is, like, you know, you have the ability, you know, yes, you could do this with Jeremy Renner himself, and that's super easy because he has an alpha channel. But what if the content you're looking for doesn't have that? And so to bookend this properly, let's go back to the project, and what the heck? Let's bring in a shape demo here, and now we're going to use Jeremy's track mat to reveal that. Now, what we can do is we can actually move his mat around, and you can see that it reveals the content that's right there. So if what you're looking now, again, this is not the best demo ever, but you know, it's illustrative. The idea of if Jeremy was motion and not just a still image, and if the background was moving, so you could have this be footage. It doesn't have to be a static, you know, star pattern with a repeat on it. It could be a video clip. It could be some other thing, and you're revealing it by using the alpha channel of something else. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So that's track mats. That's what track mats are for, and that's what they do. You can also do them with Luma. So you don't just do them with alphas. You can also do them with a Luma mat, which will now take the brightness value of that layer as what gets revealed or hidden. So if it's brighter or whiter, it will be revealed, and if it's darker, so he's wearing a dark suit, so obviously that's not a great choice. You also have an aluminum inverted mat, which will now reveal basically because the background is black, so it's like mostly white, but where he's bright, it becomes transparent. So yeah, and there's some creativity. There's some creative opportunities here that are waiting to be explored or not. It's anyone's game here in terms of how this behaves. Any questions so far on how this technique might look, or what I'm trying to get across to you guys? I mean, there's,
How do you get the track mat in?
So again, what you'll do is you can it assumes, first of all, the thing that you need to have is either a brightness or a hang on. I didn't know the sheriff was actually, that's not the sheriff, that's not the military. It doesn't just have to be a shape, or, well, it could be a shape. It doesn't have to be a Photoshop layer like it is here. You can use a shape as a
I mean, but how do you get the track mat that column in?
So the way that I did this here, oh, you mean this one?
To the right, there's a track mat alpha channel.
Got it. Oh yeah. Oh, how do you find this part right here? This toggle switches and modes button right there at the bottom will reveal that as an option for you. Okay. So the ability to add this track mat is available to any layer that isn't the top layer, because part of it is the top layer doesn't have anything that it can be tracked to. Because the whole point of the track mat is it uses the alpha layer of the layer above it to reveal or hide the content of that layer. So when you apply the track mat, you're applying it to this layer, but you're using the layer immediately above it as a mat. And notice that generally speaking, as soon as you do that, so the other thing to understand is that when you're looking at a comp like this and you apply a track mat, look at what happens to the visibility over here as soon as you apply it. By default, it turns that visibility off for that layer. It assumes you don't want to reveal it, because if you did, it would just be the same as overlaying it itself. So this is, so this is track mats. I've seen students in the past use this to great effect for some of their projects that they've done. It's pretty powerful, and it can be, I mean, it is very, very fertile ground for experimentation. Not kidding. You guys have no idea. We haven't even gotten into animating. Just from compositing, just the compositing capabilities of After Effects are pretty impressive. And when you start to add the ability to animate these capabilities over time, I mean, yeah. Things like iPod commercials from the 1990s or early 2000s is really trivial to do. I'm not kidding. It's really, really easy. Okay, I think that just about does it for today. I don't think I had anything else to give you in terms of content. So this was interesting. Definitely also a reminder. I said this at the top of the class. I'll say it again. All of you do have a USB drive to turn your stuff in on. So I think I saw one person had loaded something onto the server for their homework once since then, and I pulled it off, and it's on. I've that's cool. But for any future homeworks, definitely put them on the USB drives, and that is the program for the night. Thank you, guys.